Much. I was going to ask for a show of hands of your backgrounds, but I can only see about 4 rows because of the light, so please forgive me if I go straight into the presentation. I'm Trevor Brocklebank from Home Instead Senior Care. Home Instead Senior Care started 7 years ago in the UK. We now turn over around £70 million across the UK. More than 75% of that is private, and we're very selective on which local authorities and indeed which CCGs we interact with. Key point here is it's about doing things differently and being very successful. The purpose here isn't to talk about Home Instead. It's not to impress you with those stats. It's really to impress upon you that you can do things very differently and be very successful. I really think we need to move away from this one-size-fits-all approach to care and see more specialist providers with real expertise in individual areas. Now, for those of you who are lucky enough to be around in the industry back in the mid-90s, it was pretty much like that. The sun was shining, the sky was blue, the sea was calm. It was a pretty good place to be. Well, over the last few years, things have changed, and they've changed quite radically. That has become that. Charting a particular course is extremely difficult. Your main objective is staying afloat. House of Lords report, Ready for Ageing, issued just a few weeks ago, says we're woefully unprepared for the ageing society. And it says radical changes are needed in the care sector. But we're not alone. This isn't just a UK problem. World Economic Forum issued a paper called Global Population Ageing, Peril or Promise, and they came to the conclusion that virtually no country in the world is ready for the impact of our ageing society. Nearer home, the UK Home Care Association, and if you're involved in the sector and not engaged with the UK HCA, there's a great stand outside, they can give you some more information, but their Home Carer magazine talked about turbulent times in the sector. Caring Times went on to talk about the huge insolvencies in the sector, 47% up for public sector suppliers, 49% up in the health and social care sector. Rates are being slashed. Service users who used to get care packages are finding those reduced or even not available at all. Southern Cross has collapsed. Everywhere you look, every time you open a paper, there's a story about just how poor care is. Dilnot report, Age UK talks about care in crisis, Unison talks about the industry being on the brink of collapse, and so it goes on. So, I'm about 5 minutes into the presentation, and all I've talked about is bankruptcies and forced price reductions, less clients qualifying for care, and large cutbacks in the charitable sector. And guess what? It's getting worse, much, much worse. So I think we've got two options. The first, given it's getting close to 4 o'clock, is we just go to the bar and just give up and let's just go and have a great party there. Or we radically reinvent the way we operate. It's not just about step changes. It's not about reducing rates by £1 an hour. It's not about reducing a package by 5 minutes at a time. It's about a radical reinvention of how we operate. More people than ever need care, and that's just going to increase. There isn't any more money. There's no point debating it. There just isn't any more money. It's not a political situation. It's not whether it's a Conservative or a Labour view. There just isn't enough funds around to make that happen. One size fits all is just too rigid an approach. It has to be strategic, and it has to be innovative, and it has to be different to what we've done to date. This is a great phrase from Henry Ford: if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And that's so true in the sector. We can't just keep doing more and more tenders, reducing prices, putting more pressure on the system. We need to step back and totally relook at how care is provided and how that care continuum operates and how it integrates into healthcare. 7 years ago, my granddad got really bad care, and I was determined to do something about it, so my wife and I set up Home Instead. And I was quite surprised what I found in the sector. A very fixed approach, very limited innovation, very limited collaboration. People were keen to have a fight. Let's go and fight with the commissioner. Let's have the commissioner fighting with providers. Let's have one provider fighting with another. They were more concerned about having a fight than actually the quality of care that was being delivered in many cases. It was very black and white. It was very generalist. That one-size-fits-all approach. And rules, well, they had to be adhered to. There was this blind faith that the rules were bound to be right. Now, I come from much more of an entrepreneurial background. And that's very different to what I'm used to. They are much more fluid, much more collaborative environment. Things aren't black and white, typically they're grey. People are nimble and specialised, that's how you become successful. And rules are there to guide, but not just blindly followed. Now, some rules are really, really important. They can be life and death, and that's absolutely critical. But it's more about common sense than it is about just this blind faith and compliance with a set of rules. You may be familiar with Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of the best-selling leadership books in the world, more than 15 million sold. And Stephen Covey talks about the difference between abundance and scarcity mindset. And if you just want to take a second just to read that slide. So I think this is a really key differentiator. A scarcity mindset means that if I'm going to win, you're going to have to lose. The fact we could both win, we could both benefit, and our clients or our service users could both benefit isn't part of that approach. The abundance mindset is the complete opposite. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, come on, Trevor, get real. Let's just wake up to what's happening out there. Local authority cutbacks, hourly rates being reduced, less people qualifying for care, less people able to pay for private care, less charitable funding around. Surely that's a scarcity situation. But I would argue the opposite. It's very much an abundant situation, a rapidly ageing society, massive demand from baby boomers who want quality care. Local authority cutbacks are dramatically decreasing the number of people who qualify for care, but that need isn't going to go away. It still needs to be fulfilled. And a huge demand for signposting and that reinvention of how we operate. Now, of course, the reality is both those views are right. It's not a right or wrong decision. It's very much about an attitude. So how do we get that abundance mindset? It means everybody collaborating for the greater good of the service users and the people who need that care. There is more than enough work out there, particularly with the ageing population. We don't need to worry about less and less care need. It's quite the opposite. So that isn't the challenge. It's about how we work together for the greater good of the sector. Just as an example, we work with a live-in care provider. And as you can see here, sometimes we refer clients to them, sometimes they refer to us, sometimes we work together, and sometimes we compete with different views on what that care package should look like. Now, when we first started, it was very difficult to say, well, surely they do what we do, so why are we working with them? But the reality is, they've had clients, we've had clients, and most importantly, the people using care have had a service much more suited to their needs. So it's a great example of how collaboration actually suits everybody, particularly the recipients of the care. So what can local authorities do to create this abundance mindset to be more collaborative? Well, let's talk about what they can't do. They can't magically double budgets. That's just not going to happen. They can't increase the level of preventative care. We all know that if you did more preventative care, people's health would stay better and you wouldn't need the full-blown personal care packages we see. But that's not going to happen because the funding isn't available. We're not going to start providing nice-to-have services because that funding just doesn't exist. So the focus will be increasingly providing task-based care to those most in need. That's the reality of the situation. So there's no point debating that because that's fact. So this is really where I see the role of local authorities changing. It's becoming much more of a facilitator and an innovator rather than just a provider. It's directing individuals to what's most suited to them, not just people on a preferred supplier list or people who've been through a contracting process. It's got to include the best people out there, not just the block providers and the people that have been working with them historically. And what do care providers need to do? Well, I think the answer is to focus. Now, we talked about Home Instead, the focusing on older people, and you can see some of the stats here. A YouGov survey, only 22% of sufferers and families are living well with dementia. Now, providing companionship, particularly with later stage dementia, is extremely challenging. I arrived here this afternoon to get a phone call from a bank 30 miles away from where my uncle lives because he has dementia. He turned up at that bank thinking it was his bank. They didn't know who he was. Fortunately, I had a card with my number on there. But looking after someone with dementia is a real specialism. You can't expect a carer trained to minimum standards to go and see a premature baby and then a 5-year-old with severe burns and then someone who's fallen off a motorbike with severe brain injuries at 21 and then my uncle with dementia back to back. You need very different skills and very different approaches for each of those service users. As I mentioned earlier, Home Instead's been very successful by being niche. And again, this isn't about Home Instead. This reinforces that a niche business can be much more successful than that one-size-fits-all traditional block contract providing approach. So how do you replicate the success? I'm certainly not suggesting you all become older people care providers. There's an awful lot of opportunity out there in a whole range of other areas, whether it be children's services, learning disabilities, palliative care, other specialist areas, or indeed block contract providers. That is a specialism in its own right. Each area of the country is different, so again, I can't tell you what you ought to be doing. You need to get out into the community, understand what the requirements and the needs and the opportunities are there, and focus your business to address that specific need group. There's also a big caveat here. You need to master, if you're a care provider, different business skills to the ones that's got you to where you are today. Particularly, how do you find clients? If you've not been fed them through the local authority or what was the PCT, how are you going to grow your business? And if someone only signs up for an hour or 2 hours a week, which many of our clients do, you put an ad in the local paper and that costs you £1,000, it could cost you a year just to recoup the cost of that ad. The answer for our business is word of mouth. By being the very best quality provider, people refer work to us, and obviously there's no cost from a referral as opposed to an advertisement. And if you want a decorator at home, you're not going to go and look in the yellow pages for a decorator. The first point of call is family and friends who know someone who's a good decorator. If you'll do that for decorating, if you're trying to find someone to provide very personal care to someone who's very close to you, that recommendation is going to be even more important. And that means the quality of the services you provide are absolutely paramount, because people aren't going to refer to you unless you are the very best at what you do. So, just to draw that to a conclusion, I think this is a great phrase, and it really sums up where we are in the care sector. If we always do what we always did, we'll always get what we've always got. It's time for radical change. Don't risk becoming extinct. Adapt or die. That's not just for care providers, that's equally applicable to local authorities, to CCGs, to everybody who's involved in the sector. And above all else, it's about the quality of care we provide. That's what we're here to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Trevor. I think that's all woken us up after the mid-afternoon slump, so that's great. Do we have any questions or comments from the audience? You've been quite chatty all day. No? Good. Oh, yes, there is. There's a lady in the middle here. I can see a white sleeve.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
I can.
Is that how you started then, from little hour sessions?
Yes.
And you just developed word of mouth
Yes.
in your local area?
Absolutely.
And then it's just
snowballed from there.
And you said your background was nothing to do with, was your wife's background anything to do with care? Or
No,
did you
none
literally
whatsoever.
learn on the run?
Yeah, we had. I think one of the reasons we were successful is we didn't realise what we were doing was impossible. Everybody else who was working in the industry said, that'll never work, you can't do that. We didn't realise that because we didn't know any better, so we just went and did it.
So how quickly did you grow in the first 6 months?
Very slowly.
And when did it really take off then?
We're a franchise business, and we explain to our potential franchisees this is the complete opposite of a get-rich-quick scheme. This is make your money very slowly by working very hard scheme. Yeah. And any business that revolves on word of mouth is going to take time to get to that critical mass. That's not going to happen overnight. If you're selling, if you put a big advertising campaign, you will get a response, not for care, but for if you're selling widgets or whatever. But if you're building a business, it's always going to take time. Those first 2 or 3 years are going to be very slow. Typically, it'll take twice as long and cost twice as much as you anticipated.
And there's a gentleman, I think, in a blue shirt at the back. We were going to the gentleman at the back first.
Thanks. Tom from TLC in Manchester. I can see, obviously, you've grown from being very small, and you've talked about how to get more business and to grow and adapt or die, essentially. Have you found anything? I'm not expecting the golden answer here, but what have you found to help fuel that growth in terms of recruitment? Because obviously in the care sector, that's always been a massive problem, that even if we get great referrals through great word of mouth, and we mainly get staff referrals through word of mouth as well, have you done anything to stimulate recruitment that you found to be effective and also cost effective?
I think one of the most important things about specialism is it doesn't just impact the people you serve, it also impacts the people you recruit. So you've got two choices. You can be a traditional carer on a block contract. Here's your run, very limited continuity, very little time to actually build a relationship, just do the tasks. Or you can come and work for us. We'll match you to someone. We'll give you a long-term relationship. You'll have much more time with them there, and we'll give you far more training. So it's not a difficult decision to say, well, actually, and that's not, again, it's not about Home Instead. Anybody who's got that comparison between two companies, if they're committed, if they became a carer because they love caring and they want to look after people, they're going to take this option. So it actually really helps recruitment and retention as well as the other aspects.
Okay, we have got one at the front, and then that is a hand at the back and not a scratching of a head or a stretch. Right, so we'll do the front and then the back, please.
Down here.
Hi, my name is Nita.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Hello? Sorry, I can't see. Sorry, it's
Right.
very bright down there.
How did you cope with finance? Because 7 years ago, obviously the banking industry was in different place compared to today. It's very hard to promote companies those days, especially domiciliary and nursing agencies. How did you cope?
The honest answer isn't a great answer. When we started out, no one wanted to lend us any money, which is just when we needed it. Now we're very successful. All the banks want to lend us money and we don't need any. So the challenge is in that early stage, how do you get it? Now, we're a franchise business, so for our franchisees coming on board now, because the banks have seen the success, they're very happy to lend to franchisees at very reasonable rates, but that doesn't help you with your business. And I think the major challenge was just at the time you're most in need, particularly when traditionally they've valued your business based on the size of a block contract, or that's how they look at you being successful. It's finding that local bank manager who's forward-thinking enough to say, I'll invest in this. There isn't an easy answer as a startup with no track record to persuade the banks to lend, unfortunately. The other things I would stress is there's quite a lot of regional development funds. So I'm from the Northwest. Manchester has one, Merseyside has one. There's a general, the Northwest. And these schemes are set up to help invest in businesses that people can't get bank finance for. So I wouldn't just look at the banks, I'd also look at those type of avenues.
Right, we're going to go here and then we're going to go back to the back after that.
Could you say something about the criteria you use in selecting LAs, local authorities?
Typically, we won't do a block contract and we won't provide care for less than an hour. So if they will engage with us on that basis, then we'll engage with them. Quite often on spot contracts, for example. But because we specialise in older people, a block contract doesn't give us that ability to focus on what we want to be specialists in.
Some contracts, but not block.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and then there was definitely a hand at the back there, but I can't see who it belongs to.
Hi, my name's Christina Bastoni from Guardian Angel Carers. I'm really interested in how your relationship works with the live-in care provider that you've partnered with. Of course, you may not want to share the ins and outs of it, but I think it's a fantastic idea. I don't feel that live-in care providers that work nationwide can offer the personalised service that a local domiciliary care agency can. And if you can talk me through that a bit more, that would be wonderful.
We specialise in hourly-based care, so that's how we recruit people, that's what they join us to do, that's what our charging structure, that's what our care plans, that's how we assess. So when someone says, I want live-in care, that's not what we do. We could put a team of caregivers in, but that gets quite expensive. So we spend a lot of time finding the right partner who had the same ethos, the same culture, the same values, and what quality care looked like. And then it was the challenges were really more operational. How would you put a care plan together? The way we train someone to use hoists to the operational side could be different. So we had to agree a consistent, uniform approach on how we'd go in. For example, the living carer might need to go to the dentist, so we might need to go in an emergency for 2 hours. So we need to be able to pick up that care plan and understand it as easily as if it was one of ours. It might be a living carer and they need a double handling element, so we'll provide that additional support. So again, we need to make sure that the two care bodies train in the same way, so they're going to be using that sort of equipment in the same way. So the challenges tend to be more operational rather than at the conceptual level.
Do we have any more questions?
Anybody disagree with that?
I don't think anybody dares.
Quite happy to have a debate. It's just my opinion. It's not a... If someone does.
Here we go. No. Sorry, it'll just take a moment. Thank you very much.
Charlotte Evans from Care Plus Windsor. I was just interested to know why you wouldn't decide to do live-in care yourself, why you'd go to another provider to do so. Is that not something you would consider providing as well?
Yes, and one of the conversations we've had is actually we might do this in the future. And some of our offices do live-in care. It's not an exclusive relationship, so it's down to each office. Particularly if it's a larger office with more resources, they may well do it. But if you've got a newer office just starting out, to put a team into one client can suck in a huge amount of your resource. That person then passes away or moves into a home or something happens. From a business perspective, that's difficult to manage at peaks and troughs, so you may decide that's too big a package early on.
Any more? Yeah, sorry, you were right in front of the light, so very well done. Big wave there, thank you very much.
Hi, Andrew Pickup with Optimus. Just a question on the word quality. In services, it's notoriously difficult to put your finger on exactly what that means. But perhaps you've done that. I'm interested in how specifically you define quality and what gives you the confidence that Home Instead's quality is top tier.
Okay, great question. Firstly, quality and compliance are completely different. And I think one of the challenges with the sector is there's too much emphasis on compliance. And I also believe that you can be totally CQC compliant and still deliver not very good care. If your processes are legal and they're compliant and you do what they say they do, that could get you no concerns, when actually that's not meeting the needs of the people we're serving. So one of the ways we measure quality is through client satisfaction surveys that go into much more detail than your typical QA call. And we commission an outside organisation that tells us how satisfied our clients are. So it's much more about quality than it is about compliance. Does that answer your question? Sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah, it does. I would imagine the details in the questions you then pose to the customers.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so that's
Yeah.
And I'm just checking at the back before we come to you. We'll take one last one from the front here. I'm sorry to my microphone helper, you're having to walk the length of the room an awful lot right now.
While you're doing that, just going back to your quality question, as an organisation, we only have 10 standards that our franchisees must adhere to, because we've distilled down what to us makes quality. So rather than having 1,000 rules of which people forget half the rules that they had to comply to, it's about being really, really focused on what's most important rather than the full set of compliance. And not every bit of compliance is, as in my view, as important as other bits of compliance.
Right, last one.
Yeah, how do you get round the fact that quite often users either don't truly tell the truth about quality, or else they can't because their dementia is too great?
We work a lot with family members as well as with the clients. So by engaging the family, you'll get a lot of our clients, the feedback from the family is mum's transformed after 3 months. So that gives us a great measure. Then you can still work with the individual to really try and assess. It's really working out down at their level of detail what's most important. Quality is what they think. It's not what we think it is. It's listening to their needs and then meeting them. And the skill, particularly with someone with dementia, is those listening skills are very, very important. And that's why you can't rush in and rush out in 20 minutes and deliver quality care, because you haven't got time to listen or build a rapport. Yes.
Right. Well, that was a very lively session. Thank you very much, Trevor. If you do have any more questions you want to chat to Trevor, can you let him get down the room a bit? Otherwise, we have trouble getting our next speakers on the podium because everybody rushes to the front. We've got a couple of minutes, and then we'll be back with our final session of the day. Thank you very much.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
It's right on time?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I'd encourage them to grab you.
Yeah.